musically and sonically, we all sort of became like, beat scientists, really trying to find the ultimate beat. And I think that's the song, Looking for the Perfect Beat, was quite literal. That we were all looking for the ultimate sound to take us to that escape, that warm escape musically.
Right. Joe? Hey there.
I forgot.
How are you? Joe has written extensively about I think a term that you coined that I love, called the B-boy canon. And maybe talk about what a canon is other than a weapon of medium destruction.
Yeah, canon in general, comes from religious studies, the idea of a sort of an accepted body of whatever. In the Bible, it's the books that are officially included in the Bible as opposed to the ones that are excluded. But the term has come to refer to any area where a particular community decides a certain collection of things is the real stuff, as opposed to other things that might be out there. It's sort of the official body of whatever it is that you're talking about. So I was talking about the B-boy canon really as a modern phenomenon that reflects a historical perspective among B-boys and B-girls now. Because what really stood out to me when I started working in the B-boy community was, number one, there was a series of like 5 to 10 songs that were always played at B-boy jams. And I'm talking about now.
Like hymns.
Hymns. Yeah. And they were these songs. They were the same songs that people were playing in the early 70s.
Patchy, It's Just Begun.
I Believe in Miracles. Yeah, Give It Up or Turn It Loose. They are like anthems to people. Number one, because of the sort of the inherent quality, the things that you were talking about, that there's just a feeling that time and place are encoded in the song. And a lot of people that I talk to in the community say it in exactly that way. It's like an oral picture of a moment. And you can connect with that moment in the minds of B-boys and B-girls. You can connect with that original community now, in 2012, by dancing to that music. You're reliving in a sense, or you're not even reliving, but you're connecting to that moment musically through these breaks. So that was something that's very interesting to me, just because it's in conflict with a lot of people's stereotypes about hip-hop as something that just is anti-tradition and nihilistic and not concerned with history and things like that. It's a very it is a very conservative way of looking at music with a small c, not politically conservative, but a very traditionalist way of thinking about music, and it was just something that was really striking to me.
No, the thing, and you saying that, I mean, and I don't even speak for myself, and maybe somebody can attest to it. The reason that these particular foundation beats, let's say that the Give It Up, Turn It Loose, and not even Apache, because Apache came in afterwards. That was an obscure record that came into the scene. But the Give It Up, Turn It Loose, the I Believe in Miracles, the Just Begun, all these records were being played in our house parties. You understand? We used to have parties for everything. We had parties for graduation. We had Christmas party. We had rent party. We had everything. Little black party. So and again, I started threefold. 72, I was a graffiti artist. 73, I was a b-boy. 74, I started DJing. So now, the involvement to me, like if you ask me, how did I feel being hip hop, I couldn't answer that question because to me it's been synonymous with my life. So as far as you bringing that across, in any, all I can say is this: the beat, and especially in our culture, the Latino and black culture, is a driving force. The beat is the foundation of everything. You got the beat that drives the force, and you got the bass line and the music that drives the groove. So when you have this thing, all of a sudden, there's not much that you can do when you hear a thumping beat coming to you that you're going to buy something like this. You could go any jam anywhere, and you put any particular record, you're going to see synonymously people bopping their heads in a certain way. How is it? It's embedded in us to react that way. You know what I'm saying? And not to take anything away from anybody else, but these particular records, from us having the gatherings that we used to have family-wise, was the driving force as music. Music is something that's synonymous, with anybody's life, especially in the urban community, that you have something to identify something to. If you look at any scene of any record being done by hip-hop, 90% of the time you're going to either hear Apache, you're going to hear Give It Up, Turn It Loose, or you're going to hear It's Just Begun. It's because it's synonymous. And what I can speak as far as when we did it, the reason I know I got involved is because how is it that we're going to have what was the most critical part of this hip hop culture be taken away, which was the DJ. And what was the DJ? It's the beat is the pulse of the actual culture. So that's why we kept the drum aspect heavy, and that particular, the songs that spoke in a three-dimensional aspect to us as a whole, that became magnified through the media and through corporate America.
Right. Well, one of the reasons that the DJ and the break sort of fell away has to do with this record right here. Sure, absolutely.
That I just think is interesting, just to follow up on that, is that very kind of like antithetical to what Joe was talking about. Where,
Is the mic closer?
okay, so within like a religious context, which is where that started, it comes from above, so to speak, and whereas in breakbeats and hip hop culture, it's the complete opposite. It's completely democratic. So if those beats weren't, if Apache wasn't Apache, no one would still mess with it today. You know what I mean? It's like, it's because you want to throw it on. It's not because anyone feels like they have to. It's like, it still sounds so damn good, right?
No, the thing, you understand, the way Herc brought it across was this whole aspect of keeping this beat. This beat continuous. Now, when you had the Give It Up and Turn It Loose record, which was prior to this Apache beat, which is a similar kind of drum percussion pattern, he all heard this, and like, I gotta find something else that sounds good with this, that I cannot, so it doesn't become boring, let me put something else that's in the same vein to connect with it. And when they connected, what made it even crazy was the guitar, and you think about it, the drums on the percussion being played on Apache is King Erickson, which is an American percussionist. So, remember the elements are still there of that whole aspect of driving force behind the beat. Sooner or later, somebody would, if the culture was already created, that beat somehow, somewhere they found, because one thing that I can attest to as far as DJs, we always try to find something that nobody else has. So that's what the whole term of diggers, like nobody in the right mind would have thought about, if Bambaataa when I came out with thinking of using Billy Squire Big Beat that just came out in 1981 as a breakbeat would have never been touched.
And Lou, I have a question.
Yes.
Some people might not know this. What was the difference in time between Apache got popular in the Bronx from when it was actually released?
Well, at least 3 years. At least 3 years span. 3 years span, because Apache was released in 1973. And by the time it really got popular, it was 1976, when Rocksteady was being most definitely brought up to the forefront, and all B-boys across, let's say, the Bronx itself, and they started hitting all the other boroughs, that it became as popular as it became. And then it really took off, let's say, 1980 or 81, when Sugar Hill did Apache, when the whole infamous, part of it. And then, after that, when Flash did the Wilson Steele, that he was cutting the record up, it was over. Because they knew exactly, when you could hear a record that everybody reacts to it, because when that record came on, like I said, you can play that record in any party and you get a reaction. If you don't play it, nobody's going to hire you again.
I want to ask you a question. When am I ever going to get this opportunity again? One of the things that I think that's interesting to me is the kind of the practical aspects of DJing, which is, and this is, you were both touching on this, these records, the reason they're popular is because they worked. People would dance to them, and if they didn't, they wouldn't have become part of this canon. So I've always kind of wondered about this. A lot of those early breakbeats, all of those early breakbeats, have a lot of Latin percussion on them. They have a feel of, to me at least, kind of an area of overlap between Black and Latino culture, and knowing that that's the audience that you're DJing to, and especially if you're DJing to a mixed audience, it seems like these records would be especially the perfect records to appeal to everybody, as opposed to just appealing to a Black audience or just appealing to a
No, I would disagree. Perfect example, Long Red by Mountain. Live version, the record on the album version completely sucks. One thing. Another record, Rocket in the Pocket, Sarong. Live version is the only one that you rock. The one on the album sucks. It takes somebody like, let's say, and I give him all the credit, because if it wasn't for this dude, you could forget about it. It takes a guy like Bam having the insight of going at this and looking at a quad, go to a record, he's got a record called Rock Crew back in the day, look at a rock record and says, this is something that will work for me. And what I want to do. Long Red, you hear the record, or everybody say, oh, Long Red is going to say, ladies and gentlemen, not ladies and gentlemen, what's the record goes, jeez.
Clap your hands, Shorty.
Louder. Wow. Clap your hands to what he's doing. Boom, boom, bang. On tempo jack, that's what you know. Anything other than that, you hear the guitar, you say, what the heck is this? Exactly. So it takes somebody being creative enough and God bless Flash for taking and being fast enough to catch certain beats to make a record synonymous with something. Another record that was huge, 2001, from the soundtrack. The only reason it became popular was a guy like Flash could catch it. Other than that, it would never been created. It takes somebody to innovate. I mean, a perfect example, and not because it's here, certain style of music, if it would not have been for the way Public Enemy used these crazy sound of the grunt, that way anybody would have even thought about bringing this record back out, it takes somebody saying, okay, I'm gonna be against the curve. I'm gonna be completely against the curve, and that's the reason, why they are the staple of hip hop the way they are. The reason you can hear Public Enemy now in another 30 years is because they did that. You want to hear any artists from now, everything is either copycat or a formula artist, and what's gonna happen? You can forget about it. Perfect example, M2 Juicy. Banging records when he came out back in the early 80s. And why could Biggie use it afterwards? Come on. It speaks for itself. What I see is this, and I'm speaking from a DJ and a music lover to begin with. I started, my career in music started at 3 years old playing congas, and that was embedded in me. When you hear somebody that can put a music together with all their soul and you hear everything in it, somehow, some way it's going to get listened to. When you have the formula being put into somebody's career, then you have a problem. And that's the reason why music has developed in the way that it is now. Fine, people may be making millions of dollars in a short time, but the longevity and the legacy of the music that's being created, it has nothing right now. Because right now everything is an 808 drum machine being double time slowed down with double time hi-hat coming up and a quick synthesizer on it. There's no formula, dude. It doesn't make it at all. Now you hear the records that were took, from guys like early Dre stuff, the Bomb Squad, took out guys like, Pete Rock, Large Professor. These guys took these records and put it into this aspect because the foundation was set from the get-go. The way Bambaataa took records and said, this is going to be a record we're going to play. When you go to a jam and let Bambaataa play Mary Mary from the Monkees, then you tell me that doesn't work. There's a certain flair of how you present something and you make it happen. If he would have been, Bambaataa would have gave up and not play the record once and it didn't get the reaction it was, it wouldn't have happened. And the biggest aspect, the reason why we did the breakbeats is because DJs back in those days were breaking records. They were breaking records, and we had no problem playing this record at this time whenever. I mean, perfect example, you got guys like Larry Levan that will play records. I mean, I seen Larry Levan take a record, take the needle off, turn the record around, put it back on the quadruple ballistic. Why? Because he knew what he had. He knew what kind of crowd he had. You had guys like Funkmaster Flex at the Tunnel. I can't even speak about that. So it takes a little bit more than just, it's not an equation to hip hop. That's the problem people seem to think. It's not an equation. It's an organic, living, breathing entity that takes something. It takes me and Bill have a connection that, is the boom bap and it's up. And that's it. Sorry, too much time.
So, no. And there was a great fear at the time that all that stuff was going away. And again, the first rap record in 1979 sort of was the capstone of the 70s, and all that street culture suddenly was reflected by rap records that were coming out that didn't really sound like the culture in the streets. And part of that is because when Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five were invited by Sylvia Robinson to go into the recording studio and record one of their first records, Flash, the DJ, who was the star of the show until that point, was sidelined. Because what's he going to do, play a record on a record? No, so they had studio musicians replay some of the favorite breaks of the day. So I was going to have them sort of illustrate some of that for us. So Rapper's Delight was based on a popular record of the summer of 1979, Good Times by She. That was the break. Okay, and so what Sylvia Robinson did in the studios, they just had a studio band replay it. Sounds like it, but not quite the same energy.
I actually must say though, the Sugar Hill Gang, the Sugar Hill Band and the Enjoy Records bands, they did a really good job.
Alright, so Get Up and Dance by Freedom. Complete with the blues. And then this was replayed by the studio band as a song called Freedom by Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5. And then finally that great break, oh, it shouldn't say by Grandmaster Flash, it should say by Incredible Mongo Band. And that was replayed in the studio as well. You get the idea. So really, the DJ had no role in those early rap records. And it wasn't until 1981 that Sylvia Robinson actually gave Grandmaster Flash a shot to do his own thing in the studio. And it was the birth of what we would come to call the DJ record. And so I'm just going to play a little bit of that right now.
You say, one for the trouble, this is for the time. Come on, girls, let's rock that.
Got 5 friends on everybody's side. DJ spinning, I said in my mind. Flash is back, flash is back, flash is fast, flash is cool, front, Schloss, and far, flash channel 2.
You say, one for the trouble, this is for the time. Come on, girls, let's rock that.
Grandmaster Flash is actually cutting these records in the studio, and they recorded him the same way I was doing. And I must also add that I was a little young when this came out, and some of these breaks he was playing I didn't have, so I was happy to just have a record. So you could, maybe, actually none of them at 9. Actually, I was 11.
Question, Nelson George is in the audience. Do you think that Sylvia and Joe Robinson paid publishing or master's rights for these records?
This is the first record I ever reviewed for the Village Voice.
Really?
This record. And
was it a good review?
Oh man, the only reason I was able to get in there is because no one else would want to write about it at that time. But the truth was, Joe and Sylvia didn't pay anybody anything.
There you go. So, wanted to just talk a little bit about what had happened to hip-hop, basically.
Dan, can I say one small?
Absolutely.
A perfect example, if you look at Rappers Delight, again, going back to the aspect of keeping the essence of the hip-hop origins alive, there's always been a dispute who was the first rap record, King the Third or Rappers Delight. Now, just by the means that it became evident which is the better record is because the better record had the original organic aspect of hip hop, which is the Rappers Delight, that had the good times aspect of it. The King the Third by Fatback was a live recording, and nothing wrong with the record. It wasn't like it was whacked or anything, but people gravitated to Rappers Delight more because it had that foundation, even though it wasn't the original record. But like M said, the Sugar Hill Band created that record. I mean, you couldn't tell the difference at that time.
You also got to mention the fact they took the lyrics.
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Oh. Exactly. That's I grew up like a block away from Cass. Well, so the record had one of the most powerful lyrics that were already known by mixtapes from that time, which was the Superman rhyme from Grandmaster Cass that Hank ended up taking, and still to this day won't say that they were Cass's lyrics. It had all the original ingredients of what hip hop culture was, and that's why the record became that first big pop phenomenon that it is.
So, as you can see to your left and your right, sort of first two eras of hip hop. First was the live era when there was no records and DJs just played records at parties, and sometimes these would get recorded on cassettes and circulated. And then when Sugar Hill started making records, the idea was to take this stuff indoors and have a band replay it, and we could call that the replay era, which ended in 1983. A guy named Russell Simmons, who basically made an aesthetic decision in conjunction with his co-producer, Larry Smith, that he didn't like rap records that sounded like disco records. He didn't like rap records that sounded canned and corny, and he didn't want any music, just beats. So it was the era of the drum machine, and Run DMC's first records are really good examples of that. Sucker MCs and It's Like That. And that beatbox era was really, the dominant sound between 1983 and 1986. But at some point, the breaks started returning, and they started returning very, very slowly in the mid-1980s, and then in a big way towards the end of the 1980s. And we just wanted to take you through a quick sort of sonic tour of these. And this will be a big sort of nerd moment on the panel.
But you know what's awesome about the Run DMC record, Sucker MC record? Larry Smith, there was a breakbeat that we used to use back in the early 80s called Action, produced by Larry Smith and Russell Simmons.
Right.
Huge breakbeat. Now Russell's no dummy. Being the breakbeat that it was, the same drum program that you hear Larry Smith using on Action is the same drum programming that he used on Sucker MCs. So, and there was nothing synonymous to that. There was nothing that started with that rap in the beginning.
Right.
So he knew exactly.
So the drummer Trevor, there's a real live drummer on Action, Trevor Gale.
Exactly.
He
produced it, he recruited people.
Wow. So, anybody want to venture? Now, again, I want to make a distinction. Again, this is kind of nerdy, between DJ records, like the Grandmaster Flash record, where you're just going from record to record, and a record that's sort of looped in the studio, basically guided in by hand from the turntable, for somebody to rhyme over and then selling that performance. So in other words, it's not live musical backup, it's a record and somebody rapping over a record. Anybody have an idea what that might be?
Well, the original aspect of sampling is Molly Moore. Molly Moore stumbled on sampling.
But before sampling, I'm talking about just guided in from the turntable. Prior to the sample.
Well, I think it's important also to talk about, make a distinction even further than that, to go super nerdy, in that there's breakbeats that kind of form the backbone of a song, so that the actual rhythm, and using it as, like, say, you would Apache, but then, especially during the keyboard and drum machine era, some breaks were kept alive as stabs. They would come in, so like, even though there weren't really any breakbeats on the first two Run DMC records, Jam Master Jay was, sampling things, by cutting them in live, like you're talking about. Yeah, so that stuff was, that's partially how some of the breaks were also kept alive, which I always thought that era was a little strange in that they could have, like you said, like why wouldn't Sugar Hill have let Flash, it wasn't really that ridiculous of an idea, I don't think, but somehow that seemed to make sense.
I would say again, it would be the corporate aspect of keeping it, to be controlled. Because I remember I produced my first record in 1981. I went to the studio, it was a semi-production deal with a major company. They wanted the record to sound just like something Curtis Blow did. Right? So what they did, they hired Dave Aldrin to mix my record. I'm like, if you want to hire somebody that sound like a record sound like the Fat Boys, then get the Fat Boys to do it. If I'm coming in here with a turntable, exactly, the record that we had used originally at the time was Johnny the Fox by Thin Lizzy, was the same drums and everything, and there was cuts. All he used was two stabs, as you say, of the cuts, and everything else was electronic scratches, electronic everything. So what happened, you understand something, when money is put into the hands of somebody that's really looking for it speaks volumes. So, people tend to compromise their values or their way of doing things when you put something saying, okay, we'll sign you, but you have to do it this way. You know what I'm saying? We'll sign you, but we want this guy to do it for you. And nothing against Dave Waldman, because I'm pretty sure a lot of guys know who Dave Waldman is here. You know, he's probably the backbone of Curtis Blow's sound back in those days. You know, all he had was a formula that he used. There's the Lin drum machine, you know, the Yamaha keyboard, and that's what it was. But if they would have given the straight go-ahead of how to continue the culture, it wouldn't have took as long as it did going to the mid-'80s to early '90s when the sample came.
So we're going to go through a quick little tour of some of these first records where you start hearing looped breaks. I don't mean looped from a sampler again, just thrown in from a turntable. This is a song from 1984 called B-Boys Breakers by Star Child and Disco B, which has a little section that has a sample of Give It Up, Turn It Loose, one of the classic B-Boy breaks.
A B-boy would in every town they call movies and shake these ways. Call them the B-boys play this.
This record actually sounds like a Curtis Blow.
The next one came out the next year, in 1985. A live recording that was made in 1983 but got released in 1985 by Profile Records. The whole thing is a sample of Big Beat by Coach Squad.
And what's great about this record is this is actually Jam Master Jay catching the break, no skips, live performance from a club back then, the Funhouse.
And then finally, again, Bill's crew had this record on the radio in 1985. It was unreleased until 1987, but this is a loop of Blow Your Head, which you heard before. Public Enemy #1 by MC Chucky D would later become the bassist for the group Public Enemy. You want to talk over this record a little bit about how this came to be?
I used to do a radio show in college at Adelphi University on Long Island, excuse me, called the Mr. Bill Show, revealing my nerd status too for a discussion. And Chucky D, Carlton Rydell, or Chuck D, was my college classmate at Adelphi. We had an interesting crew. We had Chuck D, if you're familiar with the famous writer Harry Allen. He was also, I know you are. He also was a college classmate, and if you remember the show Yo MTV Raps, Dr. Dre, the East Coast Dr. Dre. We were all students at Adelphi. So I was the college radio guy, the big man on campus, because I have the radio show. And we would have different rappers come up and do promos to promote the radio station on the campus and also throughout the area that could receive our very limited signal, which was basically Nassau County on Long Island and parts of Queens, and also if you lived in Co-op City. If you were on floor 19 of Building A, you know, in the section by Ash Loop, you could get BA. So with that, we became popular locally to the point where some of the promos developed their own energy, especially on Long Island and within Long Island. There was this young NYU student who lived in Long Beach, Long Island, named Rick Rubin, who heard about the station and heard about what we were doing. I became friends with him over time, and he used to hear some of the different promos that we would play on BAU, but more specifically, he heard this guy with this incredible voice that sounded like a preacher. His name was Chuck D, and the promo that Rick Rubin heard that he loved was the song called Public Enemy #1.
Which also was the debut of, was Flav on that original film?
Flav was on the original. I think I know.